So, it's come to this. Vakama has returned to Metru Nui, alone, and he goes for a bit of a swim to find the Mask of Time, which got launched into the ocean a little while back. He finds it with relative ease, and he sees vegetation growing and dying around it at an incredibly fast rate. The reason for this is because the mask has a hairline fracture in it, and it's just spilling its energy into the ocean. So Vakama makes use of his elemental powers to heal the fracture with an incredibly thin beam of fire. He manages to do it, but it takes forever, and he's running out of oxygen, because remember, this fucker's underwater still. As he's swimming to the surface, he gets hit by a water spout. He tries to use the Mask of Time to slow it down, but he's not fast enough. He gets unceremoniously yeeted out of the water onto land. His elemental energy and just regular energy are completely depleted, because making an incredibly thin beam of fire to meld a mask together, takes energy. So he's completely helpless when a very thick boy shows up and just plucks the mask off his face. Who is this thick boy? Oh, we will get to that. I've been playing a bit too much Mass Effect. Anyway, today we're gonna learn about Sentrakh. Oh, you thought I was gonna talk about the thick boy. Nah. Sentrakh is a... well, no one's really sure. Least of all Sentrakh. He doesn't really talk or think much. Sentrakh inhabits a frightening liminal space between states of being. And the reason for this is a fuck mountain of PTSD, inflicted on him by the Shadowed One. And in perhaps the most egregious and frightening case of Stockholm Syndrome ever recorded, his only perceived purpose in life is to serve the Shadowed One. That is how the world works. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, he has no memory of any of this. Also, if it's any consolation, the Shadowed One has vowed to one day relieve Sentrakh of his pain by killing him. Ah, the greatest gift in life. A mercy killing! These books were written for children. Remember who's on whose hand here. When I don't have ideas for cold opens, I just plug my album, so here. Vakama wakes up and immediately things are weird. He's somehow back in his old home on Metru Nui. Oh yeah, and he's a Matoran now. He's incredibly confused and starts shouting, at which point he attracts Jala, who's very much not supposed to be here. And he says, "What are you doing down here alone? You're supposed to be making the Mask of Time." Now, Vakama's super confused because he definitely made the Mask of Time, and he definitely had it not 5 minutes ago until that thick boy took it, but he's not here right now. Also, he's a fucking Matoran. What the fuck is going on? So he asks Jala, where are the Toa? And Jala says, well, I'm not gonna. The Toa are where they usually are, in the Colosseum, with Turaga Duma and Turagali Khan strategizing on how to defeat the Morbuzak. And Vakama asks, wait, who's the Toa of Fire? Jala, still very confused as to why Vakama apparently has Alzheimer's, answers, well, of course it's Toa Nuri. There's something very wrong with this picture. I should wear more blue. Vakama immediately assumes that the Mask of Time has been doing some fuckery, and that now he's like in a parallel universe or some shit. So he goes to find Nuju, because he assumes the knowledge towers might have some, knowledge on what the fuck is going on. Vakama tries very hard to explain the situation to Nuju, and Nuju immediately assumes Vakama is just on crack. But then something happens. Vakama's vision shifts. He's still in Kometru, but in the one he knows, the one that's completely destroyed. He's a Toa again, and he's completely alone. Nuju's just not there. But he's only there for a split second. At which point the cops show up and beat the shit out of Nuju for not working. Greg Farshdi is truly based. Bespoke. So Vakama books it to Ga Metru to find Nokama, who's just gotten through being harassed by Toa Visola. She's getting harassed because she was experimenting with energized protodermis, and that is expressly forbidden unless you get a Toa's permission or the permission of Turaga Duma, because they are actively trying to prevent more Toa from being made. Oh, boy. We'll get to you soon, buddy, I promise. So as these two are talking, we find a couple of things out. We find out that Anuwa got arrested for exploring an uncharted cave, and now he has PTSD from the Vaki. And we also find out that Matau is fucking dead. Yeah, no, he got murdered by the Morbuzak. Like, that just gets thrown in there. Matau's fucking dead. So now that Vakama's fully up to date and fully traumatized, they decide to go to the Great Temple together to do some snooping. And maybe find some information on the Mask of Time, if there's anything there. On their way there, they have this discussion. Based on what they've been talking about earlier, Nokama asks Vakama if he's actually made the Mask of Time yet. Vakama says yes. Nokama says she hopes that Vakama has a good hiding place for it, because otherwise the Toa might take it. And Vakama's like, yeah, it's so well hidden even I don't know where it is, because for all he knows it's still in the hands of the thick boy. And Nokama says, hey, I'm serious, maybe you should tell me where this thing is, because you were never that good at hiding stuff. Which is a weird comment to make, isn't it? But as he keeps talking to Nokama, Vakama realizes something's off. At one point he just makes up some memory, and she remembers it. Something ain't right. Vakama is leading Nokama through a cave, when something attaches to his face and he starts having visions. He finds himself standing in front of a Toa that identifies himself as Krakua. He tells him he's from the future and says a bunch of really cryptic shit about finding the truth and not failing at what he's supposed to do. He says you must be prepared to fail, but also remember that if you fail, the events of the next 10 books won't come to pass. Now Vakama's not entirely sure what he's supposed to be doing, and when he asks, hey, what the fuck are you talking about? Krakua says, I can't tell you that. He's about to find out more, but then the vision abruptly cuts off as the thing that was on his face gets ripped off by none other than Sentrakh. Man, he's just in time. That seems very convenient. It's especially weird because they're in the middle of bumfuck nowhere in a weird cave with a bunch of weird writings on the wall and a bunch of Kanoka discs lying around. It's at this point where Vakama says, yeah, no, this is bullshit, and grabs a Kanoka disc and throws it at Nokama's head. But it just passes right through her. And then the illusion breaks. We are one short of the big one, fellas. Now firmly back in the real world, Vakama looks to where Nokama was just a second ago, and it's a Vizorak. And Sentrakh has been replaced by... Oh. Okay, so this illusion was never caused by the Mask of Time. This entire parallel universe was just Makuta fucking with Vakama's head, trying to get him to tell Makuta where the Mask of Time is. Now the thing is, they are not the only two people who are after the Mask of Time, which they are reminded of as the cave opening collapses. Sentrakh and the Shadowed One had been watching Vakama wander around the island with a Vizorak in tow and just been kind of like, what? But they also figured that by following him, they would eventually also find the Mask of Time. However, they eventually realized that they didn't need him anymore when the Thick Boy showed up to bring them the Mask of Time. Yeah, he was with them the whole time. So they collapsed the cave entrance because fuck Vakama, he's not important anymore. The Shadowed One and Sentrakh depart, leaving the Thick Boy to guard the cave entrance, just in case. Time for a proper introduction. So this Thick Boy I've been referring to for a very long time is actually named Voporak. And the original set was actually a combiner from 2005, so it looks very different than the one that I mocked up. Voporak is a member of some unknown species from an anarcho-Darwinist island in the middle of bumfuck nowhere. He was absolutely dominating his region of the island when he was kidnapped by the Brotherhood of Makuta. They did a whole fuckload of experiments on this guy and came out with some really weird shit. Voporak projects an energy field that at close range accelerates time to an exponential degree, to the point where anything within like a foot of him just basically crumbles and dies. They also realized that he was imbued with an innate instinct now to hunt down the Mask of Time. So the Brotherhood loaned him to the Dark Hunters so that he could learn discipline. And, well, he just kinda didn't come back. Basically, when Vakama used the Mask of Time in the second movie, he was drawn to it like catnip. But now that he's delivered the mask to Papa over here, he just kind of doesn't really have a purpose anymore. His duty fulfilled, he is now purposeless. And now he's depressed. Makuta and Vakama both come to the realization that they're not going to be able to get the mask without each other's help. And so it becomes an odd couple type situation if one of the members of the odd couple was a genocidal maniac. Makuta sends his Vizorak minion from earlier out to distract Voporak, and it immediately dies. They use the very limited time that this buys them to find another way out of the cave, away from the eyes of Voporak. Once they have a good vantage point on Voporak, Vakama tries hurling a bunch of fireballs at him, but they all fizzle out before they actually get to him. Makuta then explains the time barrier power that Voporak has by throwing a giant rock at him, which then promptly disintegrates. Voporak notices none of this. He won't die, so he must be distracted instead. Makuta uses the psychic link he has to the Rockshi to sick a horde of them on Voporak. And hundreds of them just start dying at his feet. And he's just kind of like, huh? This gives our new tag team ample time to sneak past. This is an effective enough distraction that it takes a significant amount of time for Voporak to be like, oh, wait a second. Fair warning, this episode is just going to be a little bit weird. So the two arrive at the ruins of the Great Temple, and Makuta's like, haha, in ruins and destroyed, just like my bitch brother. And also the corpses of the giant turtles that the temple is built on. And Vakama's like, excuse me? Because that's a very weird offhand comment to make. Apparently, way back in the Dizzle, a bunch of Matoran decided to unionize. By unionize, I mean use energized protodermis to transform themselves into giant fuck-off turtles. At the time, this seemed like a sound strategy to gain greater power. These giant fuck-off turtles were known as protocairns, and these protocairns went on a giant pissed-off rampage along the shoreline. Taragaduma was at a complete loss as to what to do. Thankfully, they just kind of died on their own. The Matoran then rebuilt the Great Temple on the turtle corpses. What the fuck? None of us are really sure why this tangent is in the book. I'm chalking it up to one of Greg Farshti's acid trips, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Anyway. Vakama and Makuta arrive inside the Great Temple. They reluctantly agree to split up to cover more ground. Vakama immediately goes into hiding as he notices Sentrakh lumbering through the building. Vakama then tries to trap Sentrakh in a fire ring. However, Sentrakh just uses his powers to turn the fire to stone, and then just breaks the stone. Vakama then fires a reverse gravity disc, trapping Sentrakh on the ceiling. The minute that wears off, Vakama fires a shrink disc and turns Sentrakh about 6 inches tall. The thing is, even though he's been shrunk, Sentrakh's powers are in no ways decreased, and he starts turning Vakama's muscles to stone. As the once again full-size Sentrakh watches Vakama turn into a stone memorial of himself, Vakama notices something behind Sentrakh, an explosive canister of energized protodermis. He succeeds on a strength check and fires an incredibly thin beam of fire into the explosive canister behind Sentrakh. Vakama is freed from the spell because the explosion has broken Sentrakh's concentration, and also Sentrakh. He is out cold. There is also now another giant hole in the ruins of the Great Temple. Whoops. After Vakama leaves, who of all people should lumber out of the darkness to kick Makuta's ass but Kitangu himself? Now, I don't know why he's here right now, it's just the fight goes interestingly. Apparently, a lot of Kitangu's abilities come from him being able to absorb someone else's power and throw it back at them. The issue with that is, Makuta's power is Shadow, and he can't really be hurt by Shadow that well because he's the master of it. He does, however, have a vulnerability regarding getting the ever-loving shit kicked out of him. As Makuta points out, and effectively demonstrates, however, he is not as much of a tiny dick baby back bitch as Sentrakh was, whom, if you'll remember, Kitangu killed in one hit. After a pretty even fight, Makuta eventually gains the upper hand and soars into the sky to deliver a crippling finishing blow. However, the explosion that Vakama creates knocks Makuta out of the air and Kitangu into the ocean. This all happens just in time for Voporak and the Shadowed One to show up, with the Mask of Time in tow. This arrogant son of a bitch has come to gloat and also finish off Vakama because he thinks Vakama killed Nadiki and Kreka. Awkward. The Shadowed One tells Makuta to fuck off because he has the Mask of Time, and all he wants right now is to go off with Vakama and stab him a bunch of times until he's fucking dead. Makuta obviously doesn't give a shit about Vakama, he just wants the mask. When Vakama realizes that the Shadowed One wants him dead because the Shadowed One thinks Vakama killed Nadiki and Kreka, he rats out Makuta, obviously. He basically just tells the Shadowed One, look at his armor. Is there anything familiar there? The Shadowed One gets a real close look and says, holy shit, you ate my friends. Fuck you, asshole. You cannot treat the Dark Hunters like this. This means fucking war. This is the inception of a very long war between the Dark Hunters and the Brotherhood of Makuta. Until now, the Dark Hunters and the Brotherhood of Makuta had been on relatively amicable terms, which is kind of the whole reason that Voporak was allowed to defect from the Brotherhood of Makuta in the first place. Like, they were more or less on the same side, so for all intents and purposes, it didn't really matter. But this fucked that all up. The dynamic this sets up is fucking awesome. I love Greg Farshty. Ah, shit. As these two behemoths get ready to beat the shit out of each other, Vakama makes himself scarce to go check on Kitangu, who's managed to claw himself out of the ocean. This battle is metal as fuck. The first significant thing that happens is that the Shadowed One makes use of his eye-beams to disintegrate Makuta's wings. This right here is why Makuta no longer has wings in the present day. Then Voporak advances. In case it hasn't come up yet, I don't think it has, Makuta has mind-reading powers. And he's using that mind-reading power to anticipate Voporak's strikes. Because if Makuta allows Voporak to touch him, he will age to death. Thinking fast, he realizes there is a power that would be invulnerable to this sort of onslaught. A vacuum. Time won't create air where there isn't any. So Makuta creates a vacuum around Voporak's head. It's basically a force choke, but you see the semantics allow them to not get sued by Disney. Wait, but LEGO had the right to Star Wars first, didn't they? Hang on, no, this was way before the Disney acquisition of Star Wars. But wait, didn't LEGO do a bunch of Disney sets at one point? Oh shit, wait, hang on, the plot. Wait, 1 second, wait. Check out my band's new single. Voporak is now out cold, probably with severe brain damage, but the Shadowed One wastes no time in trying to encase Makuta in solid protodermis. The Shadowed One takes the Mask of Time and says, I win, see you later, bitch. This is the moment Vakama has been waiting for. With his jetpack set to ludicrous speed, he flies straight at the Shadowed One and yoinks the Mask of Time out of his hand. The Shadowed One wastes no time in trying to use his eye-beams to shoot Vakama out of the sky like a Ukrainian passenger jet. He manages to hit one of Vakama's jump jets, and the man goes spiraling to his very probable death. But before the Shadowed One can give chase, Makuta just flexes and breaks free of the protodermis. I've gotten swole, bitch. He then manages to grapple the Shadowed One and power bombs him onto Voporak. RKO! And the Shadowed One starts aging thousands of years in just seconds. He then leaves without a word to go find the Mask of Time and murder Vakama. 10 out of 10. I have no idea what happens to Kitangu. I assume he's fine. The final chapter of Time Trap begins with the sentence, Toa Vakama was about to die. However, his fall is cushioned by a nest of vines. Wait a second. A very familiar voice greets Vakama. Surprise, bitch! It's the fucking Karzani plant. So I forgot to mention, way earlier, when they built the second raft to get to Metru Nui, they actually used pieces of the Karzani's corpse. And there was a hint that there might be a living spore on there. As the Karzani plant explains, I do not die as the flesh dies. Yet another example of very fun storytelling. The Karzani plant then suggests that he and Vakama team up because that's the only way that Vakama's ever going to defeat Makuta. Vakama says, well, first of all, no. Second of all, what are you offering me here? And the plant says, the truth. The plant then delivers a plot twist of Shyamalanian proportions. And what is that plot twist? Well, the Karzani plant explains that Vakama was indeed intended to be a Toa, as were all of his comrades. As we learned earlier, when Makuta was disguised as Turagaduma, he was using his powers to fuck with Likan's mind to make him believe that a completely different set of Matoran than the one that was supposedly predestined to become Toa should instead become Toa. Trust me, I understand how easy it is to get lost with this lore, please bear with me. But as the Karzani plant explains, it was in fact Makuta who was being duped. Crisscross! The Great Spirit Madanui knew of Makuta's evil machinations, and he decided to flip the script on Makuta and do the exact same thing to him that Makuta was trying to do to Likan. So through some literally god-tier levels of deception, the Master of Shadows himself was tricked into actually giving Likan the correct names of the Matoran who were destined to be Toa. Namely, Vakama and his team. The old switcheroo! And Vakama then asks, wait, what about all the, literal actual evidence? Like, there were ancient carvings on walls, and he also found a Toa disc with Nuri's face on it. The plant then explains that this was planted, and says, do you really think if there's a Brotherhood of Makuta, there isn't also an order dedicated to serving the Great Spirit? This is the first time that we hear about the Order of Matanui. They're gonna become a lot more important later. Like, a lot more important. Vakama's like, well, this seems sus. Also, how do you know this? And the plant's like, oh, I caught one of his members and tortured him and got all this information and then killed him. As you do. Vakama's incredibly intrigued, but before he can get more information out of the plant, it's destroyed by a shadow bolt. The shadow has arrived. Is this too much skin? Is this too scandalous? Vakama's been cornered by Makuta. With no other options left, he whips out the Mask of Time and threatens to smash it with a hammer! Now, as we know, a hairline fracture in the mask causes its energy to leak out and everything around it to age like a president. So now imagine what would happen if you smashed the entire thing with a fucking hammer. The risks range from all of them becoming very old dusts to ripping a hole in the fabric of reality itself. Makuta's response to this essentially is, do it. You won't. And Vakama's like, you got it, bitch. And then Makuta's like, wait, hold up, wait, no. This book really makes Makuta a three-dimensional character, and I love it. Vakama lays down the law, and he's basically just like, you leave the Matoran alone, or maskant. Makuta agrees, because he knows right now Vakama is desperate. The thing is, both Vakama and Makuta know that once Vakama leaves here, and he's rebuilt Matoran society, he's gonna have a lot more at stake, and he's gonna be a lot more hesitant to, just destroy the Mask of Time. Which will give Makuta ample time and room to scheme and shit. And as we already know, he sure do be scheming. The book essentially ends with Vakama, backing out of the room with the mask as a hostage. There is an epilogue, though. Wow, we're here. So Time Trap actually has two epilogues. Way earlier in the story, one of the Matoran canisters actually fell into the ocean and was just kind of left there. Makuta fishes it out. And you'll never guess who's inside. Fucking Akhmu! And that's how Akhmu became a minion of Makuta. The other epilogue is, so you know how we've done 110 episodes of these and about 90 of them have been technically taking place in a flashback? So at the end of every single one of these books, there is an epilogue where it kind of just ends with Turaga Duma finishing up one part of the story, and everyone just kind of looking at him like, dude, what the fuck? This actually happened? I didn't really go into them because they're not super important, but they basically set up the idea that Vakama is telling all of these stories because they're on their way back to Metru Nui. Time Trap has one of these epilogues too, but it's actually established early on in the book that Turaga Vakama isn't actually telling anyone this story. He's just remembering it. No one actually knows that this happened, not even his fellow Turaga. For all they know, he just went to Metru Nui, had some trouble finding the Mask of Time, but made it back eventually. He just never told anybody. And to be honest, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Our protagonist is incredibly traumatized. Anyway, the expedition to Metru Nui has come to a close, and they've finally arrived back on the island. And wouldn't you know it, there's a welcoming party at the shore. It's the Six Rahaga and Turaga Duma. Yeah, it's not clear when he was awakened. He just was. Apparently, Turaga Anua used his mask of mind control to sort of read Duma's mind, basically, and it's actually him. It's not like Makuta, it's not some trick, it's actually just Turaga Duma. Yeah, I don't know either. So, that's it. We're back in the present day, and everything is fine. Just kidding, everything gets so much worse. You know how Matanui's asleep? Nah, fam, he's not just asleep, he's fucking dying! Shit's about to get so fucking real!